Hi everyone, I'm Guin Deadman Littlefield, 2019 NAILPRO Cup champion, and I am here to show you how to do a lipstick nail in the FiveStyle competition style. So I'm going to be doing a modified smile line and also just a classic French, but super thin like competition style. I'll have lots of tips and tricks for how to create this style and about this competition in particular. So let's get started. Okay, we've already done the form tailoring. Now I'm going to take my metal form support and I'm going to place this on the bottom of the form, and I'm going to leave a little tiny gap so that it doesn't dig into the finger at all. So I'll put my form paper back down, and then I'm going to select my C-curve stick. And this one looks like it fits real nice, but it's actually a little bit too small. You can see how it really is going to give us a gap. We want this one that is almost the same width as the natural nail, just a little bit narrower. So that's the one we're going to use. And we're going to take the form and we're going to bend that metal around this. It's very important that you make sure it's straight and not twisted. And just very gently fold that metal right around there. And I just kind of push on it to make sure it's going to keep the shape real nice. What this does is it makes your form just really, really stiff and stable, and it puts it in the exact C-curve that you want. So now we can put it on our finger, and the lipstick shape, you want the form going upward. So we're going to close those wings at the bottom there. I'm going to make sure that it lines up exactly perfectly. If you folded that metal evenly, it should line up pretty easy. And then we're just going to pinch it down and tighten those two wings together below the finger. All right, we're going to tighten this, and then we're going to check and see how it fits from the side. Remember, we want this form going up. So we're going to check from the side, and we're going to see if it's going up enough. I like to use another straight file just to see, and you can see that form is almost completely straight. So we're going to loosen it from the finger, and then we're going to raise it up just a little bit. And the length of your nail is going to determine the upward angle. So you can see how now we have space for that apex, and we're still going to be able to make that nail come straight out, parallel, in line with that lower arch. We're going to check and make sure that it's completely straight from the top view as well. And then once we've got it in exactly the right position, we're going to tighten it up just a little bit more. So I'm going to use my C-curve tweezers to really gently squeeze those sides to make sure that it's nice and tight and straight, but make sure that it still follows the natural nail. It's not like stepping in at the sides. You can see when we look down, you can't even see that natural nail on top of there. There shouldn't be any gaps. And the form is open all the way down to the end, exactly the same. It's not tapered or anything. All right, so now we're ready to apply our product. So I'm going to make an angled smile line. So the end of the lipstick nail goes at a 45-degree angle, and I want to make my smile line do the exact same thing. I want it to mimic the way my nail is going to end. I'm going to make the center point of that smile line is going to come out to about the 2 on this form. So I'm going to pick up my first bead. I'm going to press it out to get the opacity. Anytime you're using a pigmented product and you want it to be very opaque, press the excess liquid out. This applies to colored acrylics, cover pinks, white, especially your white. That's going to give you a really nice creamy consistency. Pressing that excess liquid out, it keeps you from getting that marbling. So we're going to blend that bead into the natural nail. It doesn't have to be blended exactly. Just make sure there's no big ridge there on the natural nail plate that we're leaving behind. And then you can see I'm already starting to push that into that shape there at the end and working it across. And make sure that that lower sidewall really comes straight out parallel to the natural nail fold and the center line of the finger. It's very important with this upward form placement that you really check that because you don't want to follow the lines exactly. Your sidewalls are going to drop down. They're going to kind of go over the lines and come down just a little bit. I'll show you that a little more later. So we're going to add our second bead, and don't press this one out for opacity because we want it to blend into that natural nail just a little bit more. It's still going to blend into that other bead that we put on there, but it's just going to give it just enough transparency that it blends into the natural nail and you don't get that really harsh line right there at the cuticle area of that cover pink trying to blend into that natural nail. Also, it's very important that you use a cover pink that closely matches the color of your model's natural nail. You don't want a real dark pink if she's real pale, or a real pale pink if she's darker toned. So it's very important to pay attention to that. That's why there are so many cover pinks out there on the market. So I'm just going to work this bead out towards that point that I have built. And again, we want to get this line as close to the shape, the desired shape that we want, so that we don't have to file it very much. Because again, even with that metal underneath of here, which does make our form much more stronger and stable, we still want to be very careful that there's not a bunch of filing we need to do. So you can see how this sidewall comes out parallel to the center line of the finger, and it actually is going kind of down across the lines on the form. Now we're going to check the top line and make sure that the apex is high enough and there's enough room for my white and everything. And if this needed to be a little bit higher, I could definitely build this up with the cover pink or the clear pink. But I think this is good enough because this is a super thin competition style nail. The FiveStyle competition, you want them to be the thickness of a business card, just like the traditional sculptured nail competition. So it's not important to build this up a bunch. So we're going to use our C-curve tweezers and we're going to pinch that just to tighten it up a little tiny bit. It's not necessary to pinch a lot because I do have a pretty good C-curve on my natural nail, which is important. You want to pick a model that has a pretty decent C-curve. So now we're going to file that smile line, and we're just going to use the 100 grit side of a 100-180 file. And I'm just going to start at this corner and start sharpening up that corner and just work across, keeping my smile line at that 45-degree angle shape. And again, we're just crisping up the smile line. We do not want to be trying to fully shape this with the file. That metal support underneath does help make that form a little more stable for filing, but it is not going to 100% prevent you from breaking that form loose from that nail. And when you do that, then that white acrylic will run underneath there and the bottom side of your nail will look all just terrible. So we're just going to work back and forth across that, kind of filing and crisping up that smile line and making that wall that we're going to butt our white up to. And you can see that I'm holding my file basically straight up and down perpendicular to the surface of the nail form, and keeping that lower edge in contact with the nail form, but not pressing down against the nail form at all. So now I'm going to use a super soft brush to just dust all of that dust off, not only the nail form, but my hand as well. And we're going to check down the end and make sure that it's nice and even and a nice square line. Obviously, it's kind of hard to get it at a good angle to where you can see it here. So now we're going to apply our white, and the first thing we're going to do is use a slightly moistened acrylic brush to remove any other little bits of dust that are on that form or on that nail bed, as well as to moisten that pink. So by moistening that with the acrylic liquid, you can get a really nice seal of that acrylic liquid, or that new acrylic. It'll just melt right up to that and bond really well to it, and you prevents getting any gaps or air bubbles or anything like that. So I'm going to press the bubbles out of my brush in the liquid. Oh, hold on, we're going to measure real quick before we forget. So I want to do still the 1-to-1 ratio that you would with a traditional sculptured nail, but we're going to measure from what would be the center of the smile line point. So not the deepest point, obviously, because we have this 45-degree angle nail, but the center point. So just following that center line, and my nail bed is about 20 millimeters long. So I'm going to make my free edge about that same, the center point of it. So obviously that's going to be the center, and then it's going to be longer on the side, but that will make it the same length all the way across. So we're going to pick up a pretty large bead of the white, because we are going to try to build the entire free edge in one bead. If not, it is okay to add a little bit more, but it's best if you can get the majority of it, at least the base layer, laid in one bead. It gives you the most even nail. We're going to press it out for the opacity, and then we're going to place it on and start working it down towards that corner and bringing that sidewall out on the longer side. Remember to work the entire area of that bead. Don't focus too much on one side and forget about the other side. As long as you are constantly kind of touching the product, you'll be able to move it around for quite a bit longer. But when you stop touching it, it does start to set up pretty quickly. So work the entire bead and work back and forth from side to side. I also clean my brush off in the liquid as it needed. If it starts feeling like it's kind of sticking to the product, you need to go ahead and clean the brush off, but don't come back with the sopping wet brush. Make sure you dry the excess liquid out of it. At this point, you're just using the liquid in the brush to keep it from sticking to the product. You can't add more liquid back into this product. And you can see I'm using the belly of my brush to really flatten that product out and even it up. Smush down those high spots and smooth it out real good. And we just want to make sure that it is even and pretty smooth all the way across. There's no real high spots and low spots. And again, get that free edge nice and shaped exactly the way that you're going to want it to be, so that you have very, very minimal filing. We have a little tiny low spot here, so I'm going to add just a small bead again. Always make sure that you press those beads out for when you are adding little tiny beads, because that'll keep you from getting that marbly look that happens sometimes if your white is too wet and you get a little bit of that blue liquid that's around the edge of it. So it's very, very important to press the excess liquid out of those beads, especially when you're adding a little bit more to a low spot. So I think that looks good. So we're just going to get everything out of the way so that we can start filing. We're going to just check and make sure that we don't have any low spots. You can see how it's very parallel, the top and the bottom there. We're going to go ahead and tighten that free edge up just a little bit. You're going to touch it and make sure that it's not sticky or soft so we don't smash it. And you can see how this lower line is parallel with the natural center line of the natural finger, and the top and bottom lines are completely parallel to each other. It doesn't taper or anything. So we're just going to tighten that up just a little tiny bit because we don't want it to be too wide. We want it to be right, to fit right in line with those lateral folds of the natural nail. So that's super important that it's doesn't flare out at the end. It's going to give you a much more flattering shape. But remember, we're not making it taper in either. Both sides should be completely parallel to each other. All right, we're going to make sure that it is completely set. It should click when you tap it with any tool, your brush, the C-curve tweezers. So with that metal underneath, you need to be careful when you're removing this and really push that form away from the nail before you take it off. So you can see how this has a really nice deep C-curve. So when we file, we're going to file this. We're going to file one side, and make sure you support that other side and kind of push the nail up against the file, rather than just pushing the file up against the nail, which sometimes can bend the file or cause the fingertip to bend out of your way and you'll get a curved side. use the other fingers or your thumb to push that fingernail up against the file. And that way you can get that nice, sharp, straight edge, and you don't get those curves. Because anytime there's a curve on a nail, it will make it look thicker, especially the curves going long ways up and down this nail. So we're going to file the sidewalls, and then we're going to file that lower arch, making sure that you, again, push the top of the nail with your other fingers down onto the file. Don't push up with the file against the nail. You'll end up filing into that sidewall too much, or you can file the corner off. So we're going to check from the free edge and see and make sure one side is not lower than the other, because even though the angle comes out, they should be exactly the same. We're going to start to file that end shape in there just to get our perimeter in before we start filing the surface of the nail. We are going to go back and do some more perfecting work on that free edge end. But for now, we just want to get the beginning of that shape in there. So now we're going to file the surface of the nail, and we are going to file the entire surface of that nail from the apex all the way forward in one motion, so that it is nice and straight and there's no curves other than the around the C curve shape, but from long ways there it's completely straight and flat. And that's what's going to give you that sleek lipstick tube type shape. Because if you look at a tube of lipstick, it's very straight. And that's a mistake that you see a lot of people make in the lipstick nail, is they tend to make it too narrow at the end, and so it just looks like a very thick, unflattering nail. And you'll notice I file a few strokes and then I stop and I check from different angles and make sure that everything is still lining up, and that I don't want to take too much off of one side or the other and end up with a really thin side. So you need to make sure that you're working the entire nail all the time and paying attention to all the sides and all the shapes. So a lot of the filing that I do on this shape, I will actually place the form or the file on the nail flat and just file back and forth, like up and down. So now we're just checking the shape and the consistency. Now you can see how there's this weird curve right here at the end of that free edge. This is another thing that will make that lipstick shape look very odd and thick. And the way that I have found to get rid of this is you actually kind of file that end. You're going to file that in a little bit, and the way you're going to do that is almost with a circular motion on your file. So you're filing in a circle, and it just brings that weird curve in so that it looks more crisp and sharp, gets that weird, like I said, roundness off that edge. And you kind of just have to work this until the shape is a more flattering shape. Sometimes it takes a little bit to kind of angle the file backwards a little bit to really get that nice curve in there. And wipe the excess dust off, check from the free edge and make sure you don't have any areas that are thick. And then we're just going to do a little more perfecting, and you can see how I've sped the camera up, and I've switched to the smoother side of the file. And we're just going over it and just really perfecting that shape and thinning that out. Because again, this shape, this competition, the FiveStyle, you want those nails to be very thin, like the thickness of a business card, where the Salon Success is more like the thickness of a credit card. This one, you want it to be more like the sculptured nail thickness. So now we're going to file that cuticle area very last, again, because this way our file is more worn out, so you're very much less likely to scrape or cut or abrade that skin around the cuticle area, which can cost you tons of points in the competition, and possibly, if there's a competition where there's an elimination, get you eliminated. Even if you have really nice nails, having cuts on the cuticle area will can get you eliminated. As a judge, if I see a set of nails come under the curtain, and even if they are almost perfect, if there's a bunch of blood on one of them, they're going to the bottom of the list. So it's very, very important to keep that cuticle area safe. So again, we're still just doing lots of perfecting. And with this FiveStyle competition, all 5 nails are going to be completely different shapes. So it's super important that you do nails that are obviously completely different shapes. Don't do 2 nails that are quite similar in shape and think we'll be able to tell the difference. It's much better to do dramatically different, at least stuff like dragon and butterfly. But again, you can create your own shapes. You can make up anything you want as long as they look dramatically different and they're well shaped and clean and thin. So we're going to check from the backside and make sure we don't have those little heavy spots right there at the side of that sidewall. And you can see that little spot right there makes a huge difference. So we're just going to take that off. It's just a few file strokes, but it can get you some points. So don't overlook those sidewalls there. Make sure you check from this angle as well as the front angle. So we're going to brush off all the dust from the hand as well. I like to have the glove with the finger cut off on my model during the competition because then I only have to worry about the last couple inches of her finger cleaning the dust off instead of having to worry about dust all over her hand, all over in between your fingers. And just before you send your model up for judging or take photographs in this competition, go ahead and just pop that glove off and make sure there's no dust, but it really makes a huge difference. So always check the lower sidewalls too and make sure that they're the same thickness all the way out. That's super important. And make sure that you also buff that lower sidewall and that free edge area. And in this competition, you can use the gel top coat or you can high shine buff, whatever your preference is. So we're going to apply top coat today. And again, remove all the dust, get that all cleaned off there, and then roll your towel up and get the dusty area out of the way before you apply your top coat. And then I like to use, get your lamp, I like to use a dappen dish with a wiping sponge in it and a little bit of acetone on that sponge. And then I use a 3D brush that I have designated for cleanup to clean that dust off. You can also get, if there's any little bits of the form that stuck to the bottom of that nail, the acetone can clean that off as well. And then just wipe around the nail to remove any of that dust from around the cuticle area. I recommend trying to not get too much of the acetone, if at all, on that surface of that nail. So when we go in with our top coat, the first thing we're going to do on this longer nail is make sure that we seal that lower arch. You want that to be shiny as well. That way the nail, all surfaces of the nail are shiny. And when you do that free edge, make sure that you don't pool any gel underneath of it. So now that we've done the perimeter, now we can come in on the top surface with our top coat. And I start in the center of the nail and brush it out towards the end, making sure we get all the way down on the sides. And then we're going to apply it to the cuticle area. You're going to set the brush down about 2 millimeters out from the cuticle and press it out and then push it back towards that cuticle area so that you don't get any pooling and it's very, very thinly applied right there at that cuticle area. And then brush over the whole nail. And then before you go into the lamp, make sure that you check in your lights. I recommend having a light on either side of you while you're working so that you get 2 lines of light and you don't get any shadowing. And make sure that those lines, anywhere there's a bend in that line of light, it means there's a pit or a divot or a low spot, and you want to make sure that you don't have any of those and you don't have anything you've missed on those sidewalls with the top coat. So once we're happy with that, we'll go into the lamp and cure that. I recommend using a no cleanse top coat that cures in like 30 seconds or less for competition. So then I'm going to take my oil and I'm going to put my oil on the back of my hand, and I'm going to use that same cleanup brush to apply that to the finger, and that way you can get really, really close in there to the nail, but you don't get the oil on that nail surface, because the cleansing free top coats will get they'll dull with the oil, and especially for pictures it will look really, really dull, and you'll be able to see any little streaks in that oil. And then with this brush you can really work that oil into the skin so that you don't have excess oil all over the finger and it's just dripping looking. And again, especially in photos, if you have even slightly too much oil, that nail will just look wet, or that finger. So you don't want that look. So you can see how that just looks like a nice, clean, healthy nail. It doesn't look oily or wet or anything like that. So there is our nail. And here is some photos of the finished nail from the top and the side view. And I wish you all the best of luck in this competition. Thank you very much.